We are live. So let's get the music playing here. And that's how we'll start the episode.
There's so many scams. I have to change my username. Don't ever send me money. Imposters everywhere. Richard Hart bracket.
Can you hear the
Don't ever
sound?
send me money.
Yeah.
Imposters everywhere
Awesome.
bracket. That's fucked up, right? And I'm out there actually making an effort trying to stop the fucking scams. Everyone else is like, oh, fucking that Richard, yeah, he's a scammer.
Call it a scam. Nobody really cares. We can tell you the only one that ain't prepared. Oh yes, I'ma be a millionaire. 5, 5, 5, 5, a couple trillion shares. Oh no, I ain't getting wrecked again. Richard Hart, he got us set to win. We're a family, we all the best of friends. We ain't a cult, man, just call us Hexicans. ICOs, pump and dumps, they always try to take you. Buy low, sell high, I'm tired of your fake news. You need a token, you broken, you wanna see some massive gains? Lambo, new crib, model, wife, cash and chains. Look no further at your final destination. Don't be complacent every day when you paper chasing. Choose the best, leave the rest, stop investing like you press. The only crypto that you'll ever need is Hex. Call it a scam, nobody really cares. We can tell you the only one that ain't prepared. Oh yes, I'ma be a millionaire. 5, 5, 5, 5, a couple trillion shares. Oh no, I ain't getting wrecked again. Richard Hart, he got us set to win. We're a family, we all the best of friends. We ain't a cult, man, just call us Hexicans. Your investments are safe, it's got defenses. A mutable contract that pays trustless interest. I don't understand why everybody is hating. Hex is capped at 3.69 inflation. Shares are like hash rate. The higher you take her, the more daily interest that gets paid to the stakers. Always do your own research, don't listen to me though. It's complete, it can't be changed. Hex is finito. Call it a scam, nobody really cares. We can tell you the only one that ain't prepared. Oh yes, I'ma be a millionaire. 5, 5, 5, 5, a couple trillion shares. Oh no, I ain't getting wrecked again. Richard Hart, he got us set to win. We're a family, we all the best of friends. We ain't a cult, man, just call us Hexicans. The game has changed, ain't no going back now.
Hey,
Those
Dollar
that
Cost
call
Crypto.
Hex a scam
Good
can
to see
back
you.
down. I hope you understand, I pray that you follow me. You owe the entire Hex family an apology. And stay sober, cash out, the game's over. Hex is here for the market.
How's your
cap
Thanksgiving
takeover.
going?
Buckle up, we about to be full throttle with multiple audits where we get paid to hodl. We got the game smothered, sisters and brothers, with no expectation of the work from others. It's complicated, I know that there's a lot to this. For your daily Hex updates, tuned to Hexologists.
What's up, guys?
Hex is like nothing that you ever been through, so sit back.
So I'm
relax, and enjoy
actually
the
like a really good
fundamentals.
dancer,
If you
but
like what you
I'm
hear
not gonna
by
like
now,
bust out
think
my
twice,
moves
just
until
remember
there's
you'll
like some
receive
critical
financial
moment,
advice.
you know?
Call it a scam, nobody really cares. We can tell you the
I heard that you did some ballet.
Yes, I'ma be a millionaire.
What's that?
5, 5, 5,
You said you
5,
did
a
some
couple
ballet
trillion
recently.
shares. Oh, no,
Oh yeah,
I ain't getting wrecked again.
yeah.
Richard
That
Hart, he got us set to win. We're a family, we all the best
that
of
adds to
friends.
my
We ain't a
repertoire,
cult,
you
man,
know?
just call us Hexicans.
Right on.
All right. Hey, what's up, Ross Hex? Shadowy Brilliance? Enjoying the Hex therapy
Disney
pump,
Plus,
I
Hulu,
see.
and ESPN Plus now bundled together.
Oh,
The
we don't
greatest
need any
stories and
ads.
characters, the largest streaming TV.
That just like wrecked the whole stream. It's like
Did
copyright
it-
infringement. No, it'll be fine. I don't care. Saving the moves for 10-cent Hex. Hell yeah. You know, you won't be expecting it. Let's just say that. The 10-cent Hex and the dance moves. Okay, so we gotta get rid of this this screen here.
Where did that ad come from?
I've got like a couple different YouTube accounts, and so there's one where I'm not like doxed on it, so I don't have like my credit card information going into it. Okay. So we played our song so everybody would have a chance to join us. Thanks for joining us today for another episode of Hex Therapy. I'm your host, Maddie Allen. all in, and I'm joined here with our special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, man. Yeah, Toblerone. That's the nickname you see there, the weird combination of sounds. Just think of the chocolate in Switzerland. Maddie was nice enough to invite me on the show, talk about some psychology, social psychology, crypto, hex, all that fun stuff. And basically, I hope that I could contribute something.
Yeah, well, we were chatting a little bit before we got started, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to a fellow master of psychology. So you and I both got our training in graduate level psychology. Can you tell us a little bit about your academic background?
Sure. Yeah, I when I was coming out of high school, I was living abroad with my family, and I wanted to come back and get back to the North American soil. And I went to school originally for biology, and I wasn't really cut out for science. I found out after a couple of years. So, sorry. And so I basically redirected my schooling towards something that I was still quite interested in, and I found psychology first in general, and then social psychology. And I had in my undergraduate studies a minor in psychology as well. Haven't really thought about that much recently until pretty much this year, when I have been listening to tons of YouTubers about all sorts of different cryptos, and I sort of dove back into the economic side. I think that has a lot to do with what's happening in the world, and you know, the Federal Reserve printing tons of money to you know, fix this problem that they like to point at a health issue. But I kind of think that, you know, if anyone who's been paying attention since really 2008 and even before, there was some writing on the wall. So the problems that have happened have been exacerbated by, you know, what's happening in the world now. But the problem was coming, and listening to, you know, tons of economists on YouTube and crypto experts, I've just been really since March, just every day listening, learning, and it all comes together. And I think going forward, something like Hex is just kind of put a, you know, a paradigm twist on stuff, in the sense that you're not just buying something and then maybe trying to flip it or look at charts and try to trade. You kind of have this new tool to, you know, set things for your future, make decisions later, have some patience, all sorts of things. So that's kind of how I got to talking with you today. You know, it's been a funny year.
Yeah, it certainly has, and so yeah, we'll really nerd out here today and get into social psychology of Hex. We'll talk about social capital, right? And then we'll also be talking about macroeconomics. And I'm hoping that this will help everybody in Hex to help see some of the potential use cases we see for Hex being even more than money. But we'll review the case for Hex as money, and then we'll also review the evidence that it can be used also to benefit people's mental health and their health in general. And so that's what makes us so excited to be working in Hex and to be involved in this world-changing technology. And so I heard my phone go off, so I think we might be having more viewers joining us. Welcome, everybody. Unhexable says, "What's up, guys? Still taking you're still taking your omega 369. Wow, good job." So that is something that I wanted to touch on here, is what we talked about during our last episode of Hex Therapy, right? And that was the omega 3 is something that enhances your prefrontal cortex activity. And let me see, do I have a picture for that? Yeah, here we go. So prefrontal cortex equals strong hands, right? And so we talked about how omega 369 has a mysteriously awesome name because 369 is the amount of interest that's paid out by Hex, a minimum. And but this is something that insulates the electrical wires in the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain where you make all your decisions and think long term and hodl and delay gratification for the future. So all of you hexicans who are not on blood thinners already can start taking 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of omega-3 per day. And this has been something that's changed my life. It made me be able to think more clearly when I thought I was already thinking pretty clear before. And it allowed me to learn a lot about crypto and improve in many areas of functioning in my life. So I was saving this to be able to take it on stream. Toblerone. Did I say that? Is that close enough?
Toblerone, yeah.
Toblerone. Have you thought about taking omega-3?
Not until I saw in the last stream you mentioned it. I've probably had my mom especially tell me she's always had vitamins, and I'm the one person in the family that just has always ignored that stuff. And I think it why not, right? And I think I need to. I just have to have some more discipline to do that. I have some basic multivitamins that I've been taking recently because my girlfriend. But other than that, I could up my game. I believe how successful you've been with it. It's a telltale, obvious sign that it works.
Yeah. Well, yeah, great. And I'm super pleased to see that somebody in the chat's doing it. It takes about 1 to 4 weeks for your glial cells to install the omega-3 material to turn it into the myelin sheath that insulates the axons in your brain and allows you to stop having electricity leaking out from your prefrontal cortex. In Unhexable, some people are sharing some links there in the chat for where they found their omega-3, and so I'm very happy to hear people are doing that. One of the topics that we'll keep coming back to over and over again in hex therapy is that this emergent property of hex as a life extension technology. And I know I've been changing around the titles of what this talk is going to be today, but that's one of the themes that we'll keep going back to, is that you can, it's a hextending your life with 3G crypto, right? And 3G crypto hex is not only programmable money, but might have an effect of programmable longevity, because it's creating hard money and wiring it to yourself in the future allows you to be incentivized to take better care of yourself, so that you're able to enjoy your incentives in the long term. And so each passing moment is a great opportunity for people to improve their prefrontal cortex through any healthy behavior, right? That helps your prefrontal cortex. Exercising, sleeping better, taking omega-3, getting enough protein, any of these things can help. And so that's a topic we'll keep coming back to, and we might get back to that sooner than we think, because today's topic is actually going to be social capital in the 21st century. And so the reason I chose that is because it's kind of an ode to a book written by Thomas Piketty called Capital in the 21st Century. And the thesis of this book is that the world is having greater and greater inequality when it comes to economics, and there's this wealth gap that keeps getting worse and worse. And part of the problem with that is the rate of return on capital is when that's greater than the rate of economic growth, then the result is a concentration of wealth. But then Piketty goes on to like say, well, you know, maybe we need a progressive wealth tax to reduce inequality. I think that HEX is a way better mechanism to allow more of an abundance of mental health and an abundance of saving for the future and healthy behaviors, right? That will indirectly lead to more productivity in the world if people are able to save for the future. And the cool thing about HEX is that it doesn't matter if you're super poor or super rich, the contract still acts the same. And if you promise to save $10 into the future, then it's going to hold you to that. And so if you stake for 15 years, $10, it doesn't matter whether you're rich or you're poor, you're going to be held to that, right? Because if you emergency end stake, you're not going to get anything back. And so this I believe could be a powerful mechanism. But Tobler Ruse, I want to hear from you. What questions do you have about HEX? What would be a good way to get into the angles that you're interested in?
Well, I have lots of questions. I always have questions. I like I said to you before, is like I'm learning. I'm fascinated with the math end because there's still so much for me to catch up on as someone who's only been in since the start of this month. But in terms of social capital in 21st century, because I've been thinking about this since we've been speaking about doing this, and it's fascinating because maybe I should preface by saying I think most people involved in cryptocurrency have already, whether they did before or they do now, some sort of distrust of, say, the banking system or government in general, just because that's part of decentralization, is the sense that, okay, you control a little bit more here, you're not at the mercy of whatever, right? So like I just remember being a kid and having $100 in my bank account. I was like, cool, in a year I'll have $105, like basically 5% was something of interest. And now fast forward to now and you barely get 1%. And so just in my own personal history, anyone who's more than 15 years old knows that it's not really, I don't want to say right or wrong, but it's kind of BS that this is happening. So in and of that statement, going to say like something like HEX and 21st century capital in the 21st century, social capital, assuming, let's say, we could trust government, it was benevolent and it was in the people's best interest. Like, let's just assume that something like HEX could be developed and woven into a futuristic, not too futuristic, like a now going forward world where, say, they want to move into, get everybody on a digital currency, of central bank digital currencies. They want to move into these, they want to control, which already goes off my initial premise, but let's still say that they could have something like a premise of HEX or HEX in of itself for everybody, and saying, if you behave in such and such a way, you will be rewarded for this behavior. It's kind of like almost how like a Black Mirror type of, you get credit scores for being good, right?
Yes.
In this way, before that ever happens, we now, in this moment in history, have HEX as a mechanism for ourselves as individuals to do this for ourselves.
Yes.
If there was yep, go ahead.
So this gets at what I think is one of the most interesting things in Hex is that we know that money has what's defined as money always has these specific functions, right? It's a unit of account. That means you know when something costs $30, you know what that means. You know how much purchasing power that is, right? And it's a medium of exchange, and so that means you can trade things, and you don't have the problem of the coincidence of wants, where the fisher, can't get a computer because the computer guy doesn't need 1,000 fish all at the same time, right? And so there are these different functions of money. There's like 3 or 4 functions of money. I believe Hex, as the most secure and most advanced game theory type of crypto, is going to actually introduce a new function of money, which is where you'll be able to pay yourself in the future. And this is an idea that some people have heard me talk about, and is a little bit difficult to understand. And it's something I've been wrapping my head around for 2 or 3 years now, as I thought Bitcoin was actually the best form of money before I saw all the security holes in it. But this idea that when you go and work for somebody else, you demonstrate a high level of motivation, and you're able to be productive, right? And so having structure created by going to work for somebody else, that's typically good for people's mental health. Even people who have enough money a lot of times end up volunteering or end up continuing to work, right? Because maybe they enjoy what they do, or maybe it's just good for their mental health to have something to keep them busy and keep them structured and keep them taking care of themselves. And so this idea that with paper money, it's not programmable, and so there is no way for you to pay yourself effectively. But how awesome could it be for your mental health if you could program your own health behaviors, and, for example, let's say, pay yourself to quit smoking tobacco, or pay yourself to take more steps in your day, and so that way you're less likely to get depressed. Or the possibilities are really endless, and that's what's so exciting about it. And I think it's really easy to start shooting holes in this and saying, well, if this technology exists, then it is going to be like Black Mirror and everything. But that's how crypto is different than any other point system that has been created before, because it's not having to go through a centralized server to get validated and to have value. It is a bearer instrument, which means that whoever holds it, the private keys, has the value of it. And so it defies many of the limitations of other forms of money. And so
imagine it. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
You give me an idea. Imagine if you're trying to quit drinking, and you have a breathalyzer that you have to take every day, and if you pass the necessary grade, it releases cash into your wallet. Essentially you achieve your goal personally on your own little thing, and it digitally goes into a bank account or something like that.
Yes. And I believe that this form of gamifying mental health, making mental health rewarding, you pay yourself to do it, you have autonomy and freedom. And honestly, if you can pay yourself, you could take $10 and turn it into $1 million worth of motivation, right? When you pay yourself 100,000 times. Now that would maybe take a lot of programming, and there's concrete things that need to get worked out. But in the meantime, we might be able to bootstrap this idea onto an existing social network. And so I, in the 24-hour live stream, as I signed off and said goodbye to everybody, I made a promise, and I said, I will, and I knew it was going to be easy for me. So this was probably a bad example, but I wanted to start off with something that that would be a good example. I said, I will run 3.69 miles in the next 24 hours. And if I don't do that, then I'm socially promising right now that I'll burn a certain amount of hex. And somebody else yelled out in the stream, no, Maddie, don't burn hex. You're a man of your word. Just go ahead and make your promise on Twitter, and then people following you will hold you to it. And so this is the idea of social capital, which is another thing that Hex has a lot of, right?
When you did, just to add to that, when you did this quit smoking psych program or
yes
method, you were rewarding you were obviously a participant, right? You weren't in the.
No, I worked there.
Oh, you did both. You participated and you were part of the study.
No, I quit on my own using skills that I learned in the neuroscience laboratory.
Oh, so okay, but it wasn't like this exactly the same as the study that I saw before. I think you linked a study about patients.
Yes, I was one of the researchers on that study. And right now in the chat, I'm just adding. You're referring kind of to the article that we used as the background for this show, and so I'm just putting on the screen. This is a link that redirects through my Medium account to give you access, and it goes around the paywall. So it's like a friend link. And so you have to put HTTP, no S, :/ and then 3gcrypto.com. Otherwise your browser might say insecure or something like that. But that's
and they make you pay if you read more than 2 or something like that.
Yeah. So this will get you around that, so you don't have to pay. Or if your browser's not letting you go, you can go to maddieallin.medium.com, and that'll be with the paywall. And so that's what we're talking about there. So I
didn't mean to derail you. You were talking about
quitting smoking smoking is something that 2 billion people do, right? And so that's a pretty large audience of like potential people to onboard, right? Especially since there's actually a lot of corruption and perverse incentives in the smoking space. For example, governments get a lot of money now from collecting taxes on tobacco use, and so there's kind of an incentive to not make it easy to quit. And there's a lot of lobbying with tobacco companies in Washington.
That's so backwards. That's so backwards.
Yeah, it is. And then there's this huge health burden in the end. But the truth about smoking is usually covered up. Smoking is good for you in the short term. That's why people do it. People smoke because it helps. It's an antidepressant, anti-stress. It helps people focus. It's an appetite suppressant. There are all these awesome benefits of nicotine, but when it comes to
moderation,
it's expensive. The downsides are tobacco is expensive and it damages lung tissue, and so inhaling it isn't a good idea, and it's highly addictive, right? And so, but the one of the missing tools out there is that psychology research has shown us that contingency management is the strongest effect size in all of psychology. If you pay somebody to do something, that it makes them really likely to do it, right? And so we in our laboratory paid people $1,000 to quit smoking tobacco, and we were testing different smoking cessation aids, a patch versus a pill, and measuring people's brainwaves and their life history and all that other stuff. And so, but it turned out that we retained like 80% of our participants, whereas normally about only 40% of participants are retained. So we weren't even studying that, but we knew that there's this huge effect of contingency management. And so paying people to do something is a really powerful thing. And so if people can use Hex to pay themselves to increase healthy behaviors, then that's gonna be a super powerful use case for crypto.
And when you did that study, are those rewards? I know that it was 500 first and 500 after, if I remember. But
you actually read the study.
Well, yeah, it's good stuff, and I have you know, it's my background as well, so I find that stuff interesting. But I try to apply it to you know, how could this work in other places? And so I'm wondering, does something like that need to be weighted if you have an extremely addictive substance that, you know, I don't know, meth or something, and people are, you know, pretty much cannot go on with their day or function without the next, you know, their focus is only on the next hit. If you're trying to incentivize them with the carrot of money, which is, like you said, probably the most powerful carrot there can be to fix somebody, you know, more than like I don't know, love or whatever. It's like you need to have this incentive that's tangible, and so cash is cash, or money is however you. So would somebody who's that hooked on something, would they need a larger incentive for the next day, week, month, or does it work better if it grows? Like you get a pretty good first day, pretty good second, but if you get to a week, it's even like, how would that work if, say, because when I read your what you linked me, and I was thinking, how could a local government or, you know, implement this to try to fix problems? Because my city has problems. Where I used to live has problems. Like, and they try to fix it with like, you know, free needles or this and those things. You know, they do one little thing, but they don't fix anything. You know, so if to apply what you've linked to me, how could that start? What would be the best method to start such a thing? In terms of like, if you were designing a study, or let's say like you approached the government and said,
these are excellent questions. And I've thought about this, and I don't think that any of the existing power structures are going to be able to implement something this revolutionary, right? If they did, it would be simply out of incompetence, right? And I doubt that there's as much incompetence as it seems like there is. I think incompetence is a cover for a organized system of centralized control, and there are major incentives pumping through the world that create governments and corporations to continue to, as Richard says and others have said, to trap you in their ecosystem, right? They want to trap you in their ecosystem, and they want to rent seek, right? They want to be the middlemen on everything, right? Because that's the most profitable thing possible.
Pharmaceutical industry,
pharmaceuticals, Amazon, insurance companies, right? Like insurance, like let's talk about medical health insurance. The reason why price only go up in medical spending is because insurance companies make sure of it, because they get a percentage of the total that's spent. And so they conspire with medical providers and governments. And so it's no wonder I'm planning on hopefully having some guests come through the show that are medical providers operating at a very high level and running into barriers left and right that seems like incompetence, but what it really is making sure that the policies are in place to continue charging the most amount of money. The government and the medical powers to be, they don't continue to maintain their power structure if you get better. The billing has to go up. The mechanisms have to stay inefficient. And this is part of the reason why we're not having an abundance of healthcare that's free. We're not having major leap forwards in any treatments. It's not because people aren't inventing them. It's that they're getting beat down by regulation. And so if we want to talk about longevity research and we want to talk about viral mental health, and we want to talk about the future of using HEX as a programmable money where people can pay themselves to get better, and where people can build trust networks where it's verified by the blockchain and by the social network that where there is no middlemen and people are doing things for glory and for other incentives that are properly aligned with people getting better. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's the idea.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, with something like HEX, it's completely individualized, like you say. So I go to my computer, I set a date, I set an amount, and I get my end state then. With something like health, with the cigarette one, for example, I was like, how did you know? Well, so I believe did they do a blood test, or like how do they know it's the person smoked or didn't smoke tobacco?
We did a breath sample every 48 hours. We did a saliva sample, a urine sample, and a blood sample. And we gave people feedback before they quit so that they would know that we would catch them with a breath sample immediately if they smoked. And we held it over their heads. You get $500 for participating in like 50 hours of research, and you get a $500 bonus if you remain smoke-free during the duration of the study. And it was randomly assigned for a delayed quit group. And so we got around our ethical barriers there and actually had good science applied. But the reason why HEX as a life-changing form of behavioral medicine will not be run as a study necessarily is because of the regulatory problems, and it takes 6 months to a year to get a study approved, and there are all these restrictions about how much you can pay people. You're not allowed to pay people too much. That's unethical to pay people too much money, even if you're incentivizing their health behaviors, which is just another reason to leave it up to the individual's sovereignty, their independence. You get to choose your own behavior changes. And what would be amazing is if we can develop a network or a blueprint for how people can do the programming of their mental health in a way that's so fun and easy. It's like tapping a button. It's like playing Candy Crush. It's and maybe it's never going to be just a huge reward, right? Because who out here is sending their money 15 years into the future, right? Like, what a freaking bummer, right? Like, oh, now I'm kind of like out of the game, and there's all these emotions of like of doing something that's good for you. It's like when you quit smoking, or when you wear a nicotine patch and then you smoke on top of that, you're making it so that the smoking isn't rewarding to you anymore. And so it's kind of like a letdown. It's like you're smoking and it's like, oh, this thing isn't working. You know, I'm not getting that immediate rush because my receptors are already filled up. And so it's like, it's going to change people. So I think having hard money and having Hex and being able to send money into the future and improve your delayed gratification, I think that is going to have a subliminal effect on people's health and cause them to take better care of themselves, whether they're thinking of it or not. But I think that there's another layer that can be built onto Hex where you're incentivizing other behaviors other than saving for the future, and that'll be more of a supraliminal. It'll be something that is explicit.
Yeah, I also think that, especially as somebody who came in, a few weeks ago, it's not the way it's designed. It's actually not that difficult to have a lot of 10 or 15 year stakes if you also have shorter ones, because you can make it easier on yourself. If you don't have the patience, you say, okay, I realize that longer and bigger pays better, but I don't want to wait that long and forget about it or whatever. I can do something in a month. I can do something on my birthday. I can do something on, New Year's Eve in 2 years. Like whatever you want to do. There's smarter ways to do it, but it makes delayed gratification up to you what your type of discipline level is. And if you're really impatient, but you want to extend your ability, you can mix it up however you want. That's the fun part about it, is you literally get to press the button yourself and choose what you want exactly, and then you see exactly the rewards. Like it's even probably more than what you see because of other things like penalties and whatever. But you can be the most impatient person and still extend laddered out stakes to make it easier on yourself. It's kind of smart, like in the sense that it appeals to anybody. I know Joe said last time when he was struggling and it helped him, he just put something like $150 max to the end, 5555, and he just did the whole thing, and he probably needed that, right? For his,
that was his first stake. Yeah, his
exactly,
very first stake was a Quattro Cinco.
So that shows like that's the opposite of somebody who would be like, I want my first one to be 30 days. That's the most I can wait, and then they do 90, then they do a year, then they do 5 years, and so it's something for everybody there.
What I'm doing with mine is now I'm just going to build it out all on the end. And that's not going to be right for everybody. And I love how Kareem shared his amazing insights last night, and he showed his proof, right, that he's sent a ton of money way out to himself in the future. For me, I'm not showing you what my values are, but I'm showing you what my distribution is, right? And what I realized is that because so if Hex just goes down for a long time, then I'm going to keep accumulating, and that's great. And but if Hex goes up a lot, then I'm covered with these. This is by year, and I've got 2 or 3 stakes coming out each of those years that you can't see here. But if Hex appreciates as much as I think it will, and this is not financial, therapy, medical, or any other type of advice, this is free speech, then what I'm going to be doing is playing the game to the greatest extent possible by being happy with whatever these shorter term stakes do, and to continue to build more and more and more onto my longest term, because that's going to build generational wealth. That's the part that I won't be able to buy back in the future, right? The 15-year stake is the best deal ever right now, and it will continue to be the best deal ever. And doing a shorter stake, I'm planning on making myself work, you know, through all of this, and we'll see how it goes. But you know, I would prefer to have an incentive for me to be doing something productive with my time, and I think that there's also the possibility that we'll find a way to make Hex. Maybe I'll have to work for my Hex even more, right? If we develop a programming layer where I have to keep myself in very good health if I want to unlock my Hex in the future.
Yeah, and I think that with what you're doing in this channel and your contribution to the community is something that, you know, eventually, it might not take that long, it'll extend into the academic world. So because I mean, I'm sure that at some schools there are economic courses or finance teachers that are talking about crypto, and they discuss blockchain and the tech parts, but I don't think there's many psychology or sociology courses right now where teachers are discussing such things. And with what you're doing, you know, and I'm building a catalog of all these videos and interviews and discussions. Awesome. You could just link to these professors now, and they can watch or just tune in and they can listen and say, huh,
yeah,
maybe I can do something like this in my school or with my students or whatever. And slowly that can grow to a different part of the world that's not really involved right now.
I would love to see that happen, and I am skeptical, but I think it's worth a shot. I think that that it's, well, I come from a very like critical thinking side of psychology and neuroscience, and I think it is terrible and disgusting that contingency management hasn't been used more. I mean, it's like you know, you have the strongest effect and people are still out there doing surveys when paying people is what changes behavior. And you know, so I mean, there has been evidence-based treatments kind of getting proliferated, but the problem is that if you actually go outside of the ivory tower and you work with poor people who are on Medicaid, the incentive structures are not set up to allow you to do any kind of good interventions. There's this roadblock there, and you know, why is it that that if I wasn't using my free speech and I was trying to help people professionally, that I would be breaking the law, right? Because I would be practicing therapy outside of my state, which I'm not doing right now, and this is not therapy advice, but you know, with the omega-3 video that I released the other day, you know, 100, 200, maybe 500 people have watched that now, maybe more. And do you know how expensive that would be for the healthcare system? That I've been doing that for the past 5 years with people one-on-one or in small groups, and charging an excessive amount of money for something that I could just explain once kind of well in a video, and then there it is forever for people to learn from, right? This whole model that we have for applying mental health, I think, is very, very flawed.
Well, yeah, because you said it before, there's a lot of corruption there.
Yeah. And so the middlemen, I mean, that's what we see with the censorship, right? The shadow banning, that's what we see with all this stuff. And so I really see crypto as like the greatest form of hope, and Hex specifically. And so I was gonna see if it'd be okay with you if we walked through kind of like some of the arguments to help educate the audience and to help rehearse for everybody how we can explain this to people, why Hex is the best form of cryptocurrency, and that because otherwise I think we're missing part of our argument for using for motivating or trying to recruit people to promote Hex as a mechanism of behavior change and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So I took some notes here. People tell me that I'm better when I'm unscripted, but we'll see how it goes. And I want to kind of give credit and say thanks to all of the other thought leaders in the Hex community. I've learned immense amounts of knowledge from Richard, Dollar Cross Crypto, Crypto Coffee, RG3, Hexologist, Discourse Syndicate. Everybody has been a really powerful teacher, and so thank you all for some of the knowledge that I'm about to regurgitate here and add to. Kareem, thank you. Funding Gem, everybody else. I could keep going for hours on all the people I've learned from. So people are living longer than they expected, right? And but the global monetary policy is this idea of spending like there's no tomorrow, right? And part of the reason for that is because when you go into debt and your debt is denominated in US dollars, that means that if the value of your currency gets wrecked, then you don't owe as much in debt, right? So when the purchasing power of the dollar goes down, the effective amount of debt goes down, right? So there's this awesome incentive for the U.S. to bankrupt themselves, right?
Inflate away the debt.
That's right. And so, but the governments are taking it even further by punishing saving instead of rewarding savers with high interest, right? And so Hex solves this because Hex pays high interest on the blockchain that is different than the other forms of high interest that you can, or medium interest or low interest that you can get, where you're like giving your Bitcoin to somebody who then controls it. That's not the same thing as it getting paid from the game theory of Hex. So Hex is the third generation of crypto, I like to say, that works on top of Bitcoin's game theory. And it works on top of Ethereum's world computing system. So Bitcoin's game theory is we can validate transactions because the validators have an incentive to not ruin the bookkeeping because they're getting paid in the currency. And so there's so that's what it means. So game theory means you can predict how people are going to act ahead of time based on the incentives that they would be acting on, especially when they have a sunk cost, right? So when Bitcoiners, when mining people buy their miners, then they've invested into the system, and now their miners aren't worth anything if they allow double spending on the network. Is that right?
What would the game theory, the chess move ahead of, say, down the road, as you said yourself, and as we've been talking about corruption or not wanting to give up control from a government or banks, and they see, well, what's this Hex thing? How do we put a stop to this? And then, technically, the first, this has happened with crypto 10 years. They say, oh, they ban it or they tax the shit out of it. So in something like, I see like the most private cryptos like Monero or something have huge, well, they're not even that big, but they have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of rewards for anyone who can hack it, so that they pay the government to eliminate it or something like that.
Yeah. all of crypto is like what's considered like a honeypot. And so that in hacking, that means we know it's secure for the time being because there's this huge reward if somebody could crack it, and nobody's cracked it. So that also goes to the game theory too, right? There's this balance of like Richard says, it's a protection racket from the miners, and that's one of the several things that's wrong with Bitcoin. But otherwise, it's in Hex, it's not a problem because it's based on it's validated through Ethereum, right? And Ethereum is doing the mining, Ethereum is handling the security. And so the only other part of the security that we care about is the price security, right? And so that's protected by having a verifiable system of knowing what the future supply is going to be. Because when people stake it and they have to keep it staked and there's no way around it, then you have a better idea than ever before in any other asset what the future supply is going to be, and that will help with price stability after we get through this Genesis inflation that's I'm predicting will come to an end sooner rather than later, and then the price discovery phase where it blasts off into unbelievably high values. But that's the game theory Hex builds on the game theory of Bitcoin and utilizes security features from Ethereum, as well as inventing new security mechanisms.
And so, what type of critical mass of adoption in the short and medium term would, so let's say, take hypotheticals of
I'm glad you asked this.
Stagnant growth, exponential growth, or a bear market of like complete disinterest, like just devil's advocate worst scenario and then versus best case scenario. How? Yeah.
Hex has so many pumpamentals. It actually kind of breaks the normal adoption cycle or psychology that we would normally see. And this is something I was really hoping that you and I would get to, because the idea here is that it's not in your best interest to tell everybody you know about Hex and to put in all the work it would take to onboard them. Why is that?
So to not grow too fast, or for the price to go up too much to not be able to, or to reduce share rate?
Yeah. Why would you, if Hex is so great, which it is, why would you tell everybody about it so that you wouldn't be able to accumulate as much going forward?
That's a catch-22, because I see what you're saying, that at the same time you want them to come in at some point because you want the community or the user base to grow. So maybe it depends on the part of the graph that you're in and the timeline.
Those of us who are playing the long-term game, I think we will bring in people that we care about, and we might bring in some other people just to sharpen our bringing in skills. But I think that whether it's subconscious or not, I think that there are strong psychological effects at play that make it so the critical mass of people, if those that truly understand Hex, will not be shouting about it from the rooftops. We live in this echo chamber of people who do talk about it, and so we assume that everybody else is going to be talking about it. But that's not what the incentives say. The incentives say that that even without mass adoption, Hex will grow continuously the pumpamentals are inevitable. And so this is hard for us to wrap our minds around. But you know, if you built a time machine and went back and could buy Bitcoin, would you let everybody you knew buy it?
No,
How about everybody who owns it now? Would you let everybody buy it at that price? It wouldn't be possible, right? Because you would make the price higher. And so, so if we look at the future in this way, there's no, so I mean, that's a weird theory that I know I keep mentioning, but I don't go into great detail about. But I do not think that there are all the incentives to bring everybody, even you know, to any quality of person into Hex. I think that the critical mass of people who understand Hex will be accumulating and bringing in people selectively.
Do the pumpamentals work? You know, in like, let's say there was one person involved in Hex, because like I understand that you know, it's based off of essentially an algorithm and an interest rate that, and you know, plus a million other factors of ending stakes early, and price of T shares and all that. But it's still it's still a cryptocurrency game theory that requires human beings to be involved in order. I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding that, if we don't get another single person in this in Hex ever, it's still going to have the pumpamentals, or is that like, because I understand it's going to
So there's like what there's like maybe 20,000 people in Hex now or something, and it's already able to like deliver these crazy pump. I mean, it's mind-boggling. It really is how early we are, and so I think I'm in it for the game theory and the psychology. If I was playing my hand the best way possible, I probably wouldn't tell as many people as I've told, because I think that the adoption is inevitable. I think that the information is out there, and I think that the biggest holders who don't have any incentive to take any more are going to be the ones who are going to promote it first, maybe. But I really think that those people who understand that that the higher adoption means less Hex for you.
So maybe you could help me conceptualize T shares and T rate, that, because I understand as I grow and I learn more, but from what I understand, you have two functions of this. You have your accumulated T shares that you carry with you, and the more you have, the better, the more you earn along the way. But you also have the T shares for a specific end stake date, which is your sort of proportional share of that day's pool of end staking. All the people on that specific day in the future who are end staking to that date, let's say everyone end stakes on that specific day plus penalties from before, that gets divvied out in terms of ratio, the T shares. I think I understand that. Am I correct in saying that, let's say you have tons of T shares a decade from now, is that every single day from now until then, using the power of those to earn you more? So it matters on a specific end date, and it also matters until then. Is that correct?
Yeah. So you convert your Hex into shares, and shares are the function that pays compound interest. And so this is confusing, first of all, because compound interest is mind-boggling in the first place. Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. But in the early days of Hex, it was the share rate was it was advertised as a ratio, and so it was like 1.1 basically, and but then they converted it into a price, which is this. It's the same back end. It's the same code. It's just Richard said it looks nicer on a chart when you do the price per teach share instead of the rate that it costs. And so the rate is continuing to increase to make sure that that you can't get paid more than somebody who staked longer than you. And so longer is always better. And so that was, they had to basically create like an analog system for the compound interest. And so it's a little bit hard to conceptualize, but the idea is you buy T shares, and then that determines, based on how much Hex is locked, determines the interest payout for the system per day. And then the amount of T shares you have that's your share of that system-wide interest for that day.
So it's like, if you have, yeah.
So the amount of shares in the system varies based on how much Hex is locked, right? And so when the OA stopped, ended a bunch of stakes, right? And now the percentage is down to like 9% or whatever, then the amount of interest, is 30 to 60% APY these days. And if you're staked shorter, that's, well, you have fewer, so your share rate was higher, right? And so so then you're going to get that lower rate of interest versus if you stake longer. So what I look at, what I care about is how much does it cost to get one 15-year T share, right? So what is the price of a 15-year T share in USD? And that goes up and down. And we actually don't see how on the price chart exactly how amazing Hex is doing, right? Because everybody basically like doubled their Hex on the Genesis payout day. And so does that make sense? So if you owned Hex, it was like a reverse stock split, and so the charts that we see aren't even adjusted for that. So there's all these like hidden gems in how we can look at the price of Hex, and like that's part of the reason why Nagabo, right, like misunderstood how many bitches he had, right? Because that's how he talks about his gains is in or whatever, and so he misunderstood. He actually had twice as much Hex as he thought, and twice as much value. But he was in Vegas and traveling and didn't have his hardware wallet with him, so he wasn't able to check through the normal system, and so people got him hooked up with Staker app, and now he's promoting Hex again. It's really awesome.
Nice. Yeah.
Thanks to Discourse Syndicate for taking the time with him.
So yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, when you get down the road, when that's obviously the Genesis shares was, and currently still, I believe it's good value. But when you get to the down the road, where a lot of these big stakes, the long stakes are, with huge T shares, when that day comes in 2030 to 2035,
yes,
and people end their stakes and they they did a good job and they accumulate a huge bag that they earned, and it's going to look
Good job.
good job, and it's going to look awesome. Those big T shares are going to come off their accounts and come off in general, and it's going to be so expensive to get that would almost be impossible to get that back going forward past the next 10-15 years. So like, is there kind of like this mountain to 15 years that just will never be really duplicatable, because it's going to be so much more expensive at that time, unless people have so much hex accumulated that they can do another 15.
Yeah. So there's lots of factors that determine how much value you're generating in when you invest in hex, right? When you play the game. And what we know is certain is what your payout in hex is going to be, right? As long as hex continues to operate as we think it will. And let me just throw in, I know this is kind of a side point, but hex is not determined by social consensus. So Bitcoin, you could spin up 40 or 50,000 computers right now, and you could Sybil attack Bitcoin, which means you run a different version of the software, and you could change the number of Bitcoin that are possible, and as you could change the monetary policy of Bitcoin, right? And that would not be very expensive to do. I'm not sure why somebody hasn't done it. Probably because it would just wouldn't benefit them greatly themselves. And it would be cost a certain amount of money to do. But that's the difference between hex and something else, is that hex has a known monetary policy that's not supported by social consensus. It is written into the code, and it doesn't matter how many computers start running different versions of crypto, because we're not set up that way. We don't have nodes that are choosing what app they're going to run. Hex is a finished product. Hex is 2,000 lines of code that's locked in the Ethereum block in 2019 when it was launched, and all of the everything that happens in hex has to reference that code in the past. And so I hope I'm explaining this so that other people can understand. But that's the idea here, is that we don't have to worry about the monetary supply changing. That's why hex is the hardest, best form of money in crypto, is because it's not enforced by social consensus, and that means we can still get upgrades in hex, but there's parts of the code that are original that can't change, and that's copyrighted and trademarked, and so you can't just make a copy of it. To get to your point, the most important part that's programmed into hex is 3.69% inflation. It took Bitcoin 10 years to get that low, and now hex has done it in a year. And hex dumped 30% of its supply on the market a week ago with the Genesis the payday, and so we haven't yet seen the price explode like it will. I am thinking to myself with my free speech, because we've just ended the phase of massive inflation, and so now going forward, you know that the minimum amount of inflation there will be is 3.69% as a function of what percentage of people are staked. So that's if 100% of people are staked, then everybody's getting 3.69%. And if it's more than that, then the interest rate goes up, so if there's less staked, then the interest rate goes up for each person who is staked. And so in order for you to own more hex compared to the total amount of hex in the system now, you have to stake longer than average. If you stake longer than average, you will have more hex in the future, right? And so as people understand that, that's going to push up the amount of time that people are staking. Maybe not. Maybe people will be happy with less interest, and they'll and we are still excited to see what'll happen as the price continues to have volatility and price discovery. Once the price of hex swings up, then we'll see all the people who are happy with how much they've made and they're ready to cash out, and that'll make better opportunities for the next people who come in.
When you speak about first generation, second, and then third, hex being 3G, do you ever consider like, you know, what could 4G look like crypto? Have something built on top of this, or built on something, or combinations of other things, or the interoperability. Another crypto wants to come along and use or share this code or this idea, or even sort of like we were talking about before, some sort of agency, let's say, or a government agency wants to replicate this idea in terms of public health, and say they want to, you know, maybe it is something that's literally connecting, I don't know, a breathalyzer. Like somebody wants to say, okay, I want to apply for this program to help me quit drinking. I'll buy this thing, and the government will pay me to stop drinking if it was a problem in that area, or let's say it was a harder drug abuse problem, and people sign up for it and they say, I want to get fixed, I want to be better, I don't want to do this. I'll sign up, I'll do whatever needs to be done, and then every day I do this, if I'm clean, I get paid. And it's essentially what kind of the same thing what we were talking about before, but with citizens still getting money as the carrot, but the benefit being, as the bonus, is getting clean, getting healthy, being more productive, and, you know, actually solving a social problem.
Yeah, I could see that happening in a lot of different ways. I think that I've got a lot of thoughts about that. Can you be a little bit more specific? So you, in seeing a use case that's used by government?
Yeah, go
ahead.
Well, let's say that there's government programs already to help people in need, or help them with their addiction, right? But they're not doing anything other than giving them a clean and safe way to do it, or a place to stay, or some food every day, right? They're not really, maybe then other than a counselor, they're not really helping them incentivize themselves to fix themselves, stay clean, get it, and you know, like, it's not a surprise to anyone to say that money is a motivating factor, if not the biggest, right? Other than one's own health. But if this goes together, you say, okay, we can get people off the street and stop using drugs, or being violent, or creating maybe some negativity in their communities via a governmental program that says, okay, you come in here every day, you prove that you haven't done anything today. This hex-like program is going to show up in your account. But the minute you early end stake, the minute you do something that you shouldn't have done, you don't commit to your sobriety, then it goes away. So the incentive is you get penalized. Essentially doing hex, but with mental health and drug connection.
That makes a lot of sense, and I used to think about it that way, but now the more I think about game theory, I don't think that that's how it's going to go, because governments print money. So why would they let you use something, or why would they promote something that is going to allow you to get out of their ecosystem, right? And get out of their control, right? Inflation is a massive tax that everybody pays, and that's what funds war and corruption and all these other things, right? And that ultimately wrecks people's productivity because your purchasing power decreases by 50% over 15 years. And so you're just massively bleeding out. And so I think that this will get adopted at an organic level. I think this will be transmitted from shows like this and from setting up tutorials and people building apps. And maybe governments would get involved, but what incentive would they have?
Well, I mean, presumably
you have a conflict of interest.
Well, if the you know, the city or the state or country does better, or you know, has less violence, less crime, more productive citizens, that's, I mean, a pretty big incentive. If you have less people on the street, less homeless, less everything, and I mean,
but then they can't save you. Then you don't have to use their system to save you.
Yeah.
You don't need them. If they don't print the money and they don't decide how it gets distributed and they don't put you in the healthcare system where they pull all the levers, and the economic system where they pull all the levers, that takes power away from them.
Yeah. I mean, if perhaps it would have to be a benevolent private enterprise that could somehow also benefit. But you know, we're not in a utopia.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I think that the people who are going to be the most incentivized with game theory to promote Hex as a life extension technology are going to be hexicans, people who already have paid in, who already understand it, who have people that they care about in their lives, who they want to see live longer, so that they can all enjoy the wealth that's created by Hex. And what we're talking about here in Hex is going to be more and more. It's not how long you live, just your health, or it's not just your lifespan, but your health span. How long are you going to be healthy and feeling good? How are you going to find brain hacks to make your life noticeably better with very little cost to you? And I think that that's what really is going to change it, is not by reinventing the old systems that we have that led to this mess. And I think that that it's hard to even like describe like how messed up the system is now. And I know I want to save that for a future rant of like how you know, governments fight terrorism now with the US dollar, you know, and they control money transfers between all the different countries and all the different people. If you I mean, just go to another country and try to move around $1,000 or $10,000, and you'll really realize who runs the world is the US dollar as the trade, the world reserve currency. And so there's this, that's the power structure that's developed. And that is awesome when you can say we're fighting terrorism and we're making it so that terrorists can't get funded. That's awesome until the terrorists start to become the people who are creating more freedom in the system, or who are inventing better ways to do things. It's a big mess, and so that's what's exciting about having a system that doesn't rely on the old parts. So decentralized finance is something that is really powerful now, and Bitcoin has been getting more and more centralized, right? And with these big corporations buying into it and everything, that decreases the. I mean, it looks good, but it also helps confirm that we're in a much better technology now. Tobler Ruse, you asked like a few moments ago, you asked like what makes Hex 3G crypto and what is 4G crypto going to be, right?
Yeah.
And so like my joke to that is that I own most of the domain names for 4G crypto, 6, 7, 8, 9 G crypto. So I'll make sure to keep pointing it at Hex. I think there's one or two that I don't own, so we might go to something, and so that's my joke. But the reality is that it's all fine and well when Bitcoin says, oh, Bitcoin is not going to be replaced by a better technology because X, Y, and Z. And I've been hearing those arguments for a long time. Part of the reason is, oh, it was the only one to get distributed fairly. It came out of nowhere. It was the original. It's the trading pair for the most number of things. It's got the first mover advantage. It's got better security than anything else, right? But those are all arguments we can cut through pretty easily when we get down into how Bitcoin actually works. I've programmed a Bitcoin node. I've read Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas. I've learned how all that works. And so I'm a bit surprised that these narratives continue with all these influencers and these really centralized frontmen who are continuing to say Bitcoin won't get replaced by better technology when it has gotten. There's a better technology that's been released in Hex, and Hex does not have problems with its distribution up front. We're seeing that in the market now. The price of Hex is outstanding, and it's not falling apart because of this huge Genesis inflation phase that's over now. And so that's incredible. So I believe that because Hex is the hardest money with it's the first one with a monetary policy that is so advanced that I believe that is what will make it very hard to compete with, and what makes it a winner over Bitcoin. Because as we discussed, if you have 40,000 computers, right? That's every person in Hex. If every person in Hex used 2 of their computers to run a Bitcoin node, we could break Bitcoin. we could increase the number of Bitcoins to 10 quadrillion, right? And so until somebody, and I'm just like Richard, I understand that the games change. And so as soon as somebody can explain to me how that's wrong or how that's not true, that Bitcoin is insecure in that way, then I'm going to keep explaining how it is. Somebody says in the chat, I have 10 computers. Okay. So case in point, right? So Hex is the first that has such advanced game theory that the OA can adjust the interest rate based on what's going on in the market. And so it can pay you more during times when the price goes down, and it can pay you less when you're already getting benefits in the price. Now this is, I've never shown this before. I made this today.
I can only see it cuts off in the middle, unfunded.
Is that better or worse?
Can you move it to the left? Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're looking on a cutoff screen kind of because you're on mobile.
Yeah. Now I can read it.
So, somebody in the chat is saying, before we move on to this, somebody in the chat is saying you need 50% of the hash rate, not really about the number of computers. that's based on the security of the hash rate. But actually, what Bitcoin defines itself as based on nodes, and the nodes are how many computers are running the same version of the software. So when it split, when Bitcoin had a fork, and some people went to Bitcoin Cash and some people went to Bitcoin Core, that split the hash rate. And people always talk about the hash rate, but it's the miners only know where to send their hash power to based on the number of nodes, I believe. And so that's my response for that. That's what we're told is, oh, 50% of the hash rate, that's how the security is being maintained. But a hash rate towards what code? Hex uses the hex code that's 2,000 lines, that's audited. And if you go to ishexascam.org, that's my website where you can link to the code and you can read it. ishexascam.org. You can go there, and Hex is not a scam. Hex gamifies compound interest is the title you run into. And then you can go through and see, you can link to the security and economics audit, the Hex contract in plain English. It goes to Etherscan, and then you can click on, I've gotten to it before, the actual lines of code. Click on oh, here we go. Here, I can share this. This is useful. I haven't seen people show this before. Would that be okay? If we show the code that powers Hex? So Blaruz, are you okay with that?
Yeah. Not sure what I'm looking at here. I saw the chart you just had. Now I don't see anything. Oh, no, now I see.
Okay, this is the hex code. This is what powers all the things that happen in Hex. What did I say? 2,000 lines of code? I think it's really 22 or what? Oh, okay. It's 2,689 lines of code, right? And it spells out exactly what Hex does and exactly what it'll do forever, right? This is the only version of Hex. Now, if we go to the code in Bitcoin, we can go to the Bitcoin core code, right? That's going to be at the GitHub for Bitcoin, right? And then we could go to the GitHub or whatever they have for Bitcoin Cash. And then we could go for Bitcoin SV. We could see what code they're running there. And we can always say, oh, look, this version of Bitcoin has the most hash rate. That must be what Bitcoin is. But those miners are always going to point to whatever has the most nodes, I believe. I believe that's how they decide what to point to. That's what they define as Bitcoin. So this is what Hex is. Hex is this contract that can't change. Bitcoin is whatever code the miners are pointing to at the time. And that can be based on what the most nodes are. So that's called a Sybil attack, when you confuse the network's identity. Sybil is a famous psychology case of a mixed person or a split personality disorder. And so that's why it's funny that they named it that for computer networks. When a computer network's security is compromised by confusing the identity when too many people join who signal something else. Questions about that?
Oh, not from me.
Okay. Do you follow that?
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm not a technical person, so I have to take your word on everything. I'd have no real, I don't really have 2 cents on that. So,
okay, sure.
I understand it though. I get that because I mean, that wasn't new to me. That's also in that article you had. So
Okay.
I'm familiar with the potential problems of Bitcoin, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's helpful just to show on the screen, you know, that's the hex code, and that's what makes it different, is knowing that it's not going to change from that. And so if we go back to our window with hExter's pyramid. So I know this is hard for you to see, and there's some people who are just listening and they're not watching because they're making sandwiches like I do sometimes. So what we're seeing here is an inverted pyramid, and it shows the scarcity of different assets in the world, how abundant they are, and this is kind of an economics term, hExter's pyramid. So I came up with a new term there, hExter's pyramid. But John hExter was somebody who lived back in the day, early 1900s, and came up with this idea of a way to visualize the organization of asset classes in terms of risk and size. In hExter's scheme, gold forms the small base of the most reliable value, and asset classes on progressively higher levels are more risky. The larger size of asset classes at higher levels is representative of the higher total worldwide notional value of those assets. And while hExter's pyramid originally placed third world debt at the top, today derivatives hold this dubious honor. So basically, Safedine, Amos, whatever, he taught 3 of the classes that I took on Bitcoin. And in his book, The Bitcoin Standard, he predicts that Bitcoin will sink to the bottom of this pyramid, becoming the hardest form of money and the most valuable. And it'll suck all the value of everything else into it, just like any other currency that gets hyperinflated. So we see like our Zimbabwe $100 trillion bill. I took this picture too. It's a cool blacklight view of it. Those bottomed out, all-time low is like 20 US cents, and now they're sold as collector's items for $30 to $60. But world reserve currencies change, and I made this graphic just to show that in a really digestible way, of showing over the past 600 years, about every 100 years, a new superpower becomes the world reserve currency. Portugal in 1420, then Spain, Netherlands, France, Britain, the United States currently holds the title. And the new Bretton Woods summit that Simon Dixon and everybody talks about, that's been announced by the International Monetary Fund, they're saying, yeah, it's about time for the next world reserve currency. So I think that'll be the hardest form of crypto in the end. And that's part of what makes it the best thing for motivating behavior change and paying yourself in the future and having these futuristic function, this new function of money. It's not just a medium of exchange. It's not just a unit of account. It's not just a store of value. It's a mechanism to pay yourself for future behavior and to program your own behavior change, and to make the world a better place by incentivizing your own behavior change, paying yourself. Somebody says in the chat, reserve currency usually follows military power. Good point. Well, I think when in history, right, when assets were not digital and they were physical and they were centralized, right? If you tried to print a new form of money, people with guns could go and shut you down, right? And so the physical nature of money caused it to follow military power, right? But with digital money, that could change the game, right? That could be a huge breakthrough. Is it doesn't matter how many guys with guns you have, you can't shut down something that's truly decentralized and that is digital. You can't, because you can't locate it in the physical domain. Excellent point about military power. That's certainly been true in the past. E-gold got shut down. Guys with guns kicked down the door, right? Using Bitcoin's security. Remember, Bitcoin isn't just about mining. Bitcoin is about cryptography. And so when we talk about the elliptical curve cryptography, that's the breakthrough that Satoshi had that really creates the security for Bitcoin. Your private key, right? It can be consolidated into seed words. So you have 12 or 24 words that can be decoded into a 50-character set of numbers and letters, right? And then that can be further decrypted into a number that's so big nobody could ever guess it, even if they used all the supercomputers in the world. And that's what elliptical curve cryptography is an advanced form of geometry where and there's a very good review of that in programming Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas Antonopoulos, is explaining how the elliptical curve creates a mechanism where you can do where you can have a private key and a public key, and the public key can be verified without having to with just a signature, and the private key can sign transactions that are easily verified, but it's a trapdoor function in mathematics where it only goes one way, because division is different than addition and subtraction. So this is a very extremely technical point that's hard to convey, but just going off my memory, your private key actually is a giant number, basically, that and all of the private keys in existence are randomly chosen within this huge set of numbers in the SHA-256 algorithm that is the possibility of numbers that make up the private key is almost as large as the number of atoms in the universe. So it's like atoms in the universe is like 10 to the 77th or something, and possible Bitcoin private keys is like 10 to the 74th, and so your private key is actually representing a random number that's in between 50% of the max and the max. And so that's where the elliptical curve creates this like you can connect 2 points on it, and that creates this security. And so it's the same type of security that's used for the nuclear codes and everything, is this same form of advanced cryptography. So that's why we know if quantum computing comes along, that would not ruin crypto, because people would be hacking other things that are more valuable even than money. So people are commenting. Let's see. Decentralized crypto will allow more freedom for everyone everywhere. Yes, that is the dream. I fear it will remain a hope and a dream, knowing how the world works. When you look at how centralized power on the internet has become. Yeah, well, and the internet doesn't have very good security. And so a very possible thing is that we'll continue with the status quo, and crypto won't take over and replace these power structures. But I think that if we look at the game theory, that helps us understand. I mean, people, I know from psychology, people are very, very bad at even predicting what their mood's going to be tomorrow or the next day. So being able to predict technology that makes leaps forward is going to be probably even harder, but there's going to be clues, just like there are clues or ways to learn how to control your mood. And people do that a lot. We just could be better at predicting it. So,
I think one thing as well is, you know, we're still dealing in a world where it's controlled and run by a generation that's, you know, I guess it's the boomer generation, that at this point and eventually by virtue of time, they're going to have to, you know, pass the baton, whether they literally don't live anymore and die, or they get senile, because we can't continue to live where people who are pushing 70, 80 years old, not only they don't understand the change, they're resisting it. So that's not productive. But you could, you know, that you could,
correct.
you can get upset about it, but the bottom line is they're not going to live forever. So what's going to happen is people who are, you know, any age less than 50 are going to be more and more exposed to this world. If you look at even just kids, teenagers, they're online, and because another thing that I think of a lot is the tokenization of video games, and whether or not kids even want to learn about cryptocurrency, it's just gonna be innate, and it's gonna be part of their games. And then it's already happening. They earn them, they trade them, they could get actual cash for them. So these things, just the whole entire crypto world is going to be a tapestry of interwoven stuff where it's not going to stop. The governments can try to say whatever, but really this thing just is growing spherically, right? So that they can try to stop one thing or say we're going to ban this, ban that, but this digital trade is not going away. It's only growing.
Yes.
So as more people understand it and get involved with it and are just part of it in their daily lives, like we haven't even seen the beginning of, you know, I don't want to go too Black Mirror, but if you get credit scores or gaming scores or this score or that score, and then you have these there's no one thing that's going to replace, you know, this, you know, the fiat system or whatever. Maybe stuff happens gradually, but we're going to live in a world, we already do, where there's a dozen or 100 different viable trading things, and the dominance can sustain, or it can subside with in terms of like one dominant currency, maybe not, but we're going to be trading these things, and like we could see a world where something like Hex is, you know, you spend it directly without, you know, like so many different, I don't necessarily think this is a good thing, but there's so many different companies now, crypto companies, that are having debit cards or credit cards that allow you to, with just a tap, you're switching your crypto to fiat and you're spending it, and you're at the grocery store. That's good for onboarding kind of, but essentially, you know, there could be a video game in 5 years where somebody buys something on it with Hex, or they earn points on that thing, and they come over to Hex and stake their other thing and switch it. Like the interoperability hasn't even that graph is going like this, and for any sort of resistance to be placed, it's just so counterproductive and stupid, and a lost. It's just a lost cause of trying to fight something that's, you know, not going away. Why don't we get on board and try to just enhance it?
Richard talks about he updates his worldview when the game changes, right? And that's such an adaptive, brilliant thing to do that too many people don't do, right? And so let's talk right now about how the game has changed in the past week and in the past couple months, right? So one, Coinbase has stopped doing margin trading. Why do we think that is? Because why would you play a zero-sum game when people are inventing games that are not zero-sum, where you can win by doing something productive and useful, right? Or by creating more value in the system, right? Like Hex does, which is rewarding saving for the future, right? The latency of how long it takes for money to travel through the system, right? That's the velocity of money that economists talk about. The slower the velocity of money, the more value it's worth, right? And that makes a lot of sense because it's more rare, right? It's you need to pay a higher price or put more economic energy into it if people are sending it longer and longer into the future, right?
But
and
yes,
so,
but they do. But spending is still a vital part of any good economy. I mean, you can't. Not everybody can save because then the merchant down the street is not selling their product. Like they're like saving is good individually, but there's also the other side of the scale. You can't have everybody saving everything. So spending is not in and of itself necessarily a bad thing, but
that's just not where the value of money comes from.
Yeah, it's so like to think of
the value of money comes from storing it on a longer and longer time frame.
Right, but an economy does need, you know, there needs to be trade, and I just mean like you have
absolutely, yeah.
So like with the potential central banks digital currency, like they're going to force velocity of money by just saying, you know, because they're already running out of their weapon or their tool of interest rates manipulation. Once it gets down to zero, there's nothing, and so they can, you know, if your bank account goes to negative interest rate today, well, you go to the bank tomorrow and you stick the cash under your mattress, right? Or you do something else with it. But in the future, when there is no more cash, and they're saying that already, you can see it all this year, that cash is literally now dirty and dangerous. Don't touch cash. That's, you know, how convenient. And so eventually they're going to get rid of that, and everyone's going to be on their system. And they'll say, at first they'll make it all very attractive, but then once everyone's on board and they've got everyone hooked in, a lot of the things they can do is they can start to apply negative interest rate if they want to, or they can say, here's your money. After 2 weeks, this money's going to have a ticker on it that's counting down to zero, and every day you don't spend it, it's going to lose value. And so,
but the game changed. So that's the old way of thinking that by command that we're going to have to do what they say with their programmable money. But the reality is, why would people play a negative sum game when they could play a positive sum game?
Because most people don't pay attention to money at all. They're too busy, you know, arguing on the internet about whatever the topic of the day is. You know,
people said Facebook would never go mobile because people have big thumbs. That's what they said, and that's people sold Facebook stock and got fudded out of it, and so that, you know, so it depends what the incentives are. Another example of how the game has changed is the Uniswap airdrop, right? That all of a sudden, you know, anybody who's ever used this owns it. That kind of a model it could revolutionize the world. If a competitor to Facebook came along and said, we're going to copy Facebook because it's just a bunch of code, and then you know, then we're going to decentralize it and it would have to be a surprise. That's part of the game theory. It'd have to be a surprise. And so surprise, we're giving away ownership of Facebook 2.0 or Hexbook or whatever you want to call it. And now what are the incentives? Now, Facebook bought all their politicians, but all of a sudden there's a critical mass of people who's incentivized to push more power into the thing that's the thing that's competing from a decentralized point of view. And maybe you would still have a tragedy of the commons, but maybe not. And so Hex is kind of moving forward with we're the ones who are going to prove whether we can overcome the tragedy of the commons problem. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of it already. But that's the kind of thing that needs to get figured out. But Uniswap changed the game. They gave away their ownership, and I believe that part of the reason they did it was selfish, because there were lots of copies being made of it, and so I can't remember where I heard this, and so take it with a grain of salt. Unlike other things I tell you that are well sourced, but somebody was talking about how Coinbase owns a big chunk of Uniswap, and that was their play to keep charging fees. But what a beautiful thing that all these Hex people and other users of Uniswap, which is something that never existed before, it became the owners of it overnight by surprise. And now that gave Uniswap a competitive advantage compared to Mooniswap and all these other ones. And honestly, I go back and forth between using the one that's 1 inch that looks at all the prices and does the best one for me, and sometimes I just use Uniswap itself. But that is good. That's a game changer where something went from being open source and less valuable to suddenly exploding billions of dollars of value by surprise. And now we're decentralized and everybody owns it.
Yeah, I think that I use the analogy a lot. Like, this whole entire industry is, if you want to use a baseball game, it's like probably barely in the second inning, and people in crypto in general, like, they shit on it for as if its age is a flaw. It's like taking some gifted youth and saying you'll never be anything because you're 5 years old. Well, they won't be 5 years old forever. Things grow, and just to discount something because it's not fully developed. So that whole entire thing for this, people don't. It just boggles my mind how I'm still thinking about kind of like the resistance of believing in any of this stuff, and I think a lot of that has to do with people who are either scared or invested in other things that they can't allow themselves to say that such things, and crypto in general, or even because they won't even think of learning what Hex is if they don't even want to say that then any of it is just magic internet money, right? That's a psychology of generational disparity in thinking, or like just cognitive dissonance, basically.
Yeah,
or just being stubborn.
Well, Bitcoiners love to say that that you don't understand how the internet works to be able to use it. You don't understand TCP/IP ports and how to script, HTML language and stuff like that. You just use it and it works, right? So, and to those in the chat that are wondering about the value of physical currency and stuff, you know, some people speculate that like the person who wrote the Bitcoin standard speculates that the best form of crypto will slide underneath the dollar as backing it up, and that central banks around the world will secretly move into Bitcoin, or into really whatever the best form of crypto is, whatever the hardest money is. That's happened throughout history, that people slipped into, or they used gold as their reserve currency and used paper to circulate. And so it's possible that that hex would be used as the underlying asset for a physical currency even. But that's kind of hard to imagine.
I think about if that was the case in a a society, if there was a way to both incentivize saving and incentivize spending. Incentivized spending would be, if you use this particular thing, you get a discount, and whatever is agreed upon between the two parties, both get to immediately essentially begin saving it once that transact. So it's like the saving is a block of time and the spending is an instant, and then it begins resaving. But that's kind of an extension of just imagining a world where CDs are used as the instrument that they are, but also extending that to an exchange,
Well, and hExter's pyramid predicts that people will always use the softest form of money first. That and maybe some hexagons are already doing this, where if you have daily expenses, you're paying for it with fiat, and you're not cashing out your hex every time you have an expense, because that's the hardest form of money that you have, and that's the one that you're using for saving. And so you spend the type of money that gets devalued the fastest. You see that in countries that have hyperinflation.
I think we're kind of seeing that in this bull market, actually, right? Because people have been seeing the Federal Reserve printing more than ever, and a lot of people who, especially because everyone's been home and on the internet this last 10 months, they're reading or finding out about other ways to use that, and not let some giant governmental decision-making entity ruin their savings or their retirement plans or anything. Like, even people who are just seeing their checking or their savings account go down to less than 1%, and they say, well, what the hell is going on with what's the point? And so they're finding other things to put it into, even if it's just basic stocks or gold or whatever. The transition now, it's actually kind of funny how it's timed with this year in May with the halving for Bitcoin, because it created the very specific cycle, like bookends, every that 4-year bookending. It creates a buzz, it creates a media discussion, it creates this and that, and this is I mean, as we are now, that Bitcoin is it's still the thing that it gets the news articles, gets talked about, it gets the YouTubers, the content creator. It's the main it's the grandpa, right? Like, and grandpa's pretty much fits the description of what you've been saying with 1G, 2G, 3G. Like, you move on from it, but it kind of it kicks off the narrative, it kicks off the interest, it kicks off everything. And like thus far, it's at least in 2021 and beyond, it's going to remain the thing that onboards people to this industry. And then once they start researching and finding channels like yours and listening to more and more people, then the knowledge gets more specific. It's kind of like your funnel.
Yeah, and remember, Satoshi and Bitcoin invented that application of elliptical curve cryptography as the part of encryption security that continues to be used in hex through Ethereum's security. And so that's where the mining comes in, with not just the hash rate, but what are you mining, and what are you using? Well, it's not what you're mining, but it's that's what makes the chain, right? To prevent double spending, you have to have a way to verify that you are the only owner of this coin, right? And that you're not spending it twice within the same time ever. And so that's where the elliptical curve cryptography application to digital money was invented by Satoshi, and that's the invention that will continue. And now that has been invented, it can't be uninvented, right? It's just that we realized that paying people to pollute the environment, and again, a fact that I haven't fully fact checked, but I learned about Bitcoin energy usage early on, a year or two ago, that one Bitcoin transaction requires the same amount of energy as what it takes to power a home for an entire month. I mean, that's crazy, right? So
yeah.
So that's very wasteful to get this as the only security mechanism that you're using, or the main one. And what we found, though, is that with Hex, there's other ways to protect the code other than just burning electricity and always burning more and more and more and more and more. And that's one of the ways you're verifying the system and protecting it, is by saying, well, we burned the most amount of electricity on this chain, so that's what makes it Bitcoin, and that's the real Bitcoin.
So
can you still hear me all right?
Yeah, I was just processing all this, what you're saying. Does this suggest that all, I mean, I try to become more understanding of the technical side, but does this suggest that all proof of work is wasteful? Like, what does it mean? Because other cryptocurrencies are based off of that as well, right? Are they all? Is there no, like, are they all wasting energy? Is there some other ways? Like, is that something that gets improved upon? Or is it like something that will get moved away from as more and more, like, it was everything moved towards proof of stake? And
good question. I think that will emerge, what works and what doesn't. And that's one of the cool things about a lot of the crypto space, is that it's open source. Hex is not open source, but most cryptocurrencies are. And what open source means is that if something works for another coin, you can copy their features, and that's allowed. And so as we watch other cryptocurrencies operate, we will have more certainty than we do now of what works and what doesn't. It seems so obvious in retrospect, Hex being something that is a contract that can't change, that's a finished product when it was launched, and that provides an extra layer of security, because we're not deciding as we go what the code is going to be, or what the real code is versus copies of the code. So that provides security. Hex bootstraps on Ethereum, which does proof of work. Ethereum's playing around with proof of stake, which we're going to see how that is different. I am not an expert on that part of it, but I do know that I've witnessed other coins, smaller coins that I've been in the community and saw them grow up from the launch to being successful, and they often used proof of work because that it was seen as the 1G solution. That's how you know that the miners are being honest, is that they're staking their energy that's spent. The computing power that they're burning has a real cost to it, and so that's where their honesty is coming from. That they're staking money in the form of electrical costs.
That kind of reminds me of something we said at the beginning. More of the social aspect is, proof of work in the old sense is, you show up at the office at 9 and you go and you're sitting in your desk till 5 and you're proving that you're there. And so I was thinking that's how interesting that has changed this year, as many companies have seen that, one, they never would have allowed the majority of their office to start working from home. And now they've had to, and they see that it still works. And now that the CEOs and the CFOs and everybody starts to get together and they say, well, okay, if this does work, then why don't we downsize our office and save here? And they start, the checks and balances are all different. But going back to the psychological part of it is how much that might change people who necessarily or don't necessarily want that. Like, some people are very maybe isolated, and going to work every day is their socialization, and it is how they get their interaction with people. And now we're might move into a world where socially isolated people are kind of even more alone, and even though if they might keep their jobs and stuff, this is another mental health issue that might be needed to look at and going forward. And so I'm just thinking,
proof of health.
Yeah,
proof of health behaviors.
Right.
And I'm not an expert on all these different proofs. There's a lot of work being done to test different proofs that aren't wasting energy. Richard originally proposed in Bitcoin circles to have the Bitcoin computing power be solving health problems with kind of like an advanced AI or kind of that sort of thing. And that was rejected. He proposed that, and that's part of what got him started creating his own cryptocurrency, was his experience with trying to make Bitcoin better and people resisting the change. This here is an excellent example of the first proof of work, right? And so I don't know if it's going to let me go into the person mode. Here we go. Okay, this is proof of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is proof of work because it took a lot of human work to build that.
Yeah. Remind me though, I have a very interesting, I've seen a very interesting YouTube video about how a lot of that was built with hydraulics,
Cool.
and dams. I mean, also a lot of slave labor, but a lot
Yeah.
more ingenuity than just, okay, we need 600 dudes to pull up a giant cylinder, where we can just use the power of water. I mean, if the Titanic doesn't sink, then there's methods of lifting up a huge block one brick at a time, right? But
Yeah.
that's the power of the brain more than the power of muscle. But that's, you're exactly right. That's proof of, especially how long ago those pyramids were built. Proof of health. I wonder, another thing I was thinking is committing to something. Say somebody's bipolar and they've got medication to take, but they resist. A reward mechanism like Hex has, you know, it can apply to as well to releasing rewards based on taking what is suggested to you and proven to work. Like, I'm not suggesting that people need drugs to fix their problems, but there are chemical imbalances that have definite need for other chemicals to help. And so in some cases, I wonder how it could be extended where people reward their future selves by sticking to a promise of, you know, because I have friends experience with you know, the manic and the depressive fluctuations, and it can be wildly disparate, right? Like, you can see within a week somebody's behavior just, and that's because they felt, in my friend's case, they thought, you know, I know if I smoke this type of weed, then I don't need to do what the doctor says I need to take. But then that can work for a little while, but then, you know, the wheels come off. And so when I see something like Hex, where it's a proof of not just staking, it's a proof of committing to a time. This is committing to it's the opposite of the smoking study, really. It's like not having less of something for your health, but having more, or consistently more, for your health. And I think Hex has shown that it's a use case of coding, computer coding, to commit to something that, if you extend something physical or, you know, physiological, there's a whole new paradigm of stuff that can be applied to the real world. Without all the reasons we stated before, that there's corruption and they don't necessarily want that, because then they don't sell as many, you know, drugs. But in some cases, in some situations, people function much better if they do what a good doctor suggests that they do.
Yes. And so that's where I believe we will come out with what Staker app is demonstrating, is this idea of being able to gamify saving, right? And so it turns it into a video game almost. And we're just seeing like what is it, like the Atari version now, right? And the Atari version is like way more badass. Maybe it's like the Super Nintendo versus like going to Etherscan and like having to, you know, figure it all out yourself with Pong, right? But I think what we're gonna see is like more and more of this. I mean, imagine this technology overlaid with AR, like you know, wearable health technology. I wrote a proof of concept where Fitbit has an API, and you can program it, and you can write a few lines of code, and then it says in real time almost how many steps you took. And so then I wrote a little bit of Bitcoin script, and while I never launched it, I proved to myself that it's very possible to pay. I could have paid myself Bitcoin for every step that I took. And so imagine the power of this. And then all of a sudden, I'm not paying a personal trainer. I'm paying myself. And instead of however many dollars per hour I used to pay my trainer, then now I'm paying myself. So I get the money back. And so I can spend it again on something else or on more health incentives. So there's lots of cool stuff that can be built.
You would just need to it would just need to be really rigidly confirmed that if you lapse or you cheat, you definitely cannot access what you otherwise would have given yourself anyways.
That's what I thought at first, that that there would have to be a really strong oracle or some like truth mechanism. But in fact, it's actually, I think, more robust if it's less rigid, in the sense that you only have to be accountable more than would be inconvenient. So for example, if I can cheat the system, then maybe that's okay, because if I set a goal that's super unrealistic, then I can like recover my funds, and I can set it. What have I gained, really? Now I just reset the game. It's like going back to the beginning of the video game, right? So the example that I give is, let's just say quit smoking, because that's a behavior that I think is fun to change. And so let's say that somebody builds something on Hex, and it creates a token, or some security token, right? That gets sent, gets emailed to your doctor or something, and you have to get that key back from your doctor if you want to unlock the money that you're paying to yourself, right? And so if I sent $1 million to my doctor to verify that I quit smoking by running some tests or something, right? Then maybe I could, I could pay my doctor $500,000, right? To just like give me the key back. But the idea, or maybe I could go with the gun, and I could say, give me the keys back, doctor. But in the end, what am I doing? I'm just in the same boat I was when I started the game. Maybe a little bit more legal trouble, or maybe I have to find a new doctor, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, oh, well, I already sent it to the doctor, so it'd be inconvenient for me to ask for it back, or now it's just a little bit more incentive than normal is probably a good thing. And
it's like, if you could put sense? Some, yeah, imagine you could put some kind of like digital, a barcode on all the junk food in your kitchen. And every time you had some, it kind of locked up or restricted your access to some like type of reward that you were otherwise going to give to yourself.
Yeah.
Like, or the opposite, if you were committing to, say, and this maybe if with your brainwave studying, like if you were committing to meditate for half an hour a day.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And if you achieved a level of brainwave function that proves that you've attained what you seek to attain, you're rewarded however you see fit. I know that we're sort of talking like money is everything, but it's more about like the intrinsic reward of achieving something more than it is to like, oh, I have a lot of money now, I can buy a bunch of garbage, right? It's more so just a proof of an accomplishment.
Yeah, yeah. So money isn't everything to everybody. Some people aren't motivated by money. Richard, if he was a whale in Hex, or if somebody else was a whale, they might not be motivated by the same things that the minnows would be motivated by. And so that's something that's worth understanding. But I still think that combining the social capital and programmable money would be super effective to gamify things and maybe make it so that you could still create incentives for yourself, and you could still hold yourself to promises to whatever extent you choose. And this will be a new area for understanding. And we've already got, I made a public commitment to run. I posted the proof on Twitter. A couple of people liked it, right? And I got the satisfaction of testing that out. Joe Hexotic is he's committing to doing Omega 369. He posted about it, and now he's going to have the chance to follow up and show some proof that he's taking it and report about whether that's helping or not. But that's a health goal that he set, that he made a social capital stake, right? And so if we can learn how to especially use technologies and networks and programs that already exist and overlay these new ideas of programming health into our lives by doing a hashtag and tweeting out, or having, I really think I love your idea about doing a device that tells you whether you're eating junk food, but that takes programming. And so what if we could have something else, right? What if it was already a Fitbit scale that's connected, or what if it's for the meditation thing, you've already got a smartwatch that measures your heart rate. So you're going to meditate, and the signal that proves it is going to be showing that you lowered your heart rate. Really, I think in crypto, we think first about the first application is money, but really crypto enables decentralized trust chains to be formed. And it's something that eventually will go beyond money, just like the internet went beyond email, but that was its first app. And cryptocurrency will do things like tell you whether a video is a deep fake or not, and tell you whether somebody speaking is really their voice, because people have identity tokens maybe. But we talk about money is the first app in crypto, and we have this Oracle problem, and that's where it's hard to know what the true price of something is, because it might go through a centralized mechanism, or it's basically a computing problem. And so how do we ever know what the truth is? And in our case of behavior change, we want to know, was the behavior changed? Did you stick to your behavior change plan? And my contribution to this idea would be that actually we don't need an oracle that's 100% right all the time, because we can use our social networks. And as long as we have a way that your friend can validate that you made a behavior change, and they can't run away with your money, then and having some sort of enough well thought out backup mechanisms or whatever, if we can create trust tokens that can help verify whether you changed your behavior or not, that will not only serve to address the Oracle problem, but it'll also lead to more adoption. If you recruit a friend to verify that you made a behavior change, and now you owe them a favor and you can return it by verifying that they made a behavior change, then all of a sudden we've got more adoption than we had before. We've got more utility, right? So that might be how this is going to spread, is by people just experimenting and practicing, people who are listening to this, maybe you try taking omega-3. Maybe you post hashtag Hex Challenge or something. And, you know, like I did, go back on my Twitter and see where I did it, where Joe Hexotic, his Twitter is at Hexotic Joe. And we're making these public commitments. And then maybe this is something we can build into using social psychology and the social capital of our network, and eventually incorporating Hex into making more and more powerful incentives. There are already subliminal incentives in Hex to take better care of yourself. If you can figure out the secret to living a healthier life, you might go ahead and do it just because you locked money 15 years in the future and you want to enjoy it. Or it might get even more advanced, where you actually stake money and can only get it back if you do the behavior change. But either way, this is something new and powerful, and it's a game changer.
There should be a Hex like piggy bank for kids. They learn they learn it just. It's basically the exact same thing. It's just for parents to with like maybe a different user interface or something, and the kids do it on their own, and then you know, I don't know if yeah, basically it would teach parents and children at the same time. And that's a method of promoting this. It could promote with this family notion, right, where you're teaching people to do things together, and then you're learning about crypto, and then they're learning about Hex, they're learning about Uniswap. That's just like basically just the next generation.
Yeah,
and the parents at the same time who should be doing the same thing anyway.
Yeah, I love how you're thinking through this and brainstorming and making these connections. It's awesome. I'm really enjoying our conversation here, and I want to know in the chat who can say what's the youngest person in your life that maybe has Hex, and I'll go first. One of my best friends has a daughter who's just about to turn 9, and so I've created a Hex account for her and it's staked to the point where it'll come out right when she is 17 or 18, graduating college, and just like RG3 said, he set up Hex accounts for his nieces and nephews. There's going to be younger and younger people involved in Hex to their great advantage. Lazy for Life knows somebody who's 35 who's in Hex. Okay.
My friend, when I was explaining Hex to him, he has two daughters. I was like, just start by putting a few on their birthdays. And he's like, okay. Yeah. Wasn't that
I love
much
the
of
birthday thing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good. Yeah, and I really like how you've been like really questioning how this can get systematic adoption, and how we can recruit university types and government types and stuff. And I think that I maybe just for personal reasons like discount that a little bit, and but I'm wanting to share all the thinking that I've done and have conversations with people like you who are so smart and educated, and so that we can all come up with, can brainstorm, have a think tank, go in our separate directions, go in some directions together and some different directions, and see what we can make out of this new technology.
Yeah, I think that the university aspect that I was thinking of is it's now, like, they could create their own, or they could do the same thing like with the cigarette study, where it's not so, you don't have to create something, or you could even just use Hex. But I just know that so many things get funding, and they're, whether or not they're good studies or not, the money in certain places for those types of things, there's just there's, depending on the university, depending on the city, depending on the country, there's just tons of money available to, and so you could start somewhere with one university or one professor somewhere in psychology or economics to say, okay, this product exists and it incentivizes saving. How can we see if we can create some sort of humanitarian objective to fix a problem in this city or in this country or in the world, whatever.
Yeah.
And it starts with they do one, and then somebody reads it and they do another, and then next thing you know, like a government agency is trying it, and you know, it's not that much of a reach to think that a city could put in $1 million into a community outreach program that says, okay, how about we try this thing to see if we can get, you know, even just one person, let alone 100 off the street. You know, there's an overdose pandemic, if you want to use that word, here where I live, that people, there's almost more people dying of that than COVID here. It's because it's so why are they not willing to spend to fix that if somebody can maybe turn their life around and be productive in society or work or whatever? The governments, I know that there's corruption, but I know that there are some that are just desperate for a solution. They've been, because people are upset. People who are just in their community who are upset. They say, well, you know, do something. Don't just throw money in at nothing, or do the same thing over and over again. Try something new. So if even just an extension of that cigarette study, like, I have a question for you. How many people, I'm assuming you are one who did it successfully and then also never reverted back to smoking after?
So I wasn't a participant in the study because, well, for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, but
because I helped design it and program the tasks, and so that wouldn't have been.
But the participants.
Yes. So the participants got paid. I see we got a couple of new people coming in, so I just want to recap that I was involved in a research study. I was one of the designers and researchers who paid people $1,000 to quit smoking tobacco and study their brainwaves. And so now, what was the question?
So I was just wondering, for the people who were successful, at least for the study, did you follow up and see who remained a non-smoker?
They did, yeah. They did follow-ups as you normally would in that type of a study: 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and maybe a little bit longer. I'm not sure.
How were the numbers on the, like, did it last?
So we weren't measuring what the effect was of paying people. We were measuring what the effect was of using bupropion versus a patch versus both, versus a double placebo versus a delayed quit group. And so we already knew that paying people leads to higher rates of abstinence. But in fact, this is a very technical point, because in the olden days, before my mentor started doing smoking cessation research, it was common that studies would only retain about 35% of the people who started the study. So all of the quit smoking research before the 70s and the 80s was only studying people who found it easy to quit smoking, because they were the only ones who self-selected to stay in the study. And so that led to the conclusion that quitting smoking was easy. And that was a false conclusion because of selection bias and participant dropout. And so once my mentor realized that there was this hole in the research, he started paying people, an excessive amount of money, which wasn't that excessive, to keep people in his studies. And he consistently had, from paying people, about 80 to 85% of people retained in the study. And then all of a sudden, all the research studies that didn't have people dropping out because it's hard to quit smoking, now all the studies show that quitting smoking can be hard. And it was his research, in fact, that led to the Surgeon General issuing a warning against smoking in the first place. Because before that, there wasn't any research to suggest that there should be so many warnings. So
cool.
So the methods matter, and whether we're talking about programming research studies or we're talking about programming people that have healthier behaviors, it's the game theory that's baked into whatever money you're using or whatever game you're playing in your life, right? Most people are playing the game where they like to be rewarded. They like short-term rewards. And so they do behaviors that are not good for them in the long term because tomorrow is uncertain. And if you can get that dopamine hit today, why not? Well, when you reprogram the game and make it so that longer pays better than shorter, then that starts to make new things possible, or things that haven't existed in a long time, like saving for the future will make the world more productive.
It's kind of funny. The Hex is like its own case study.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
you can track everything on the blockchain if you have the programming skills. Sure. You can take a break real quick. We've got another 10 or 15 minutes left before we hit the 3-hour mark. I wanted to say thank you to everybody who's watching. I value your attention. It's a scarce asset. I know your time and attention are valuable, and that's why I try to come prepared to review how Hex can be a form of therapy, how Hex can be a form of programmable money that goes beyond money and maybe helps you live a longer, healthier life, have a better future for yourself. So I appreciate you all for tuning in. Tobler Ruse and I are probably going to speak for a few more minutes here on this special Thanksgiving show. But I was just thanking the audience for their attention and desire to learn. So we've got a lot to be thankful for in Hex.
Yeah.
And I was saying that we've got another 5 or 10 minutes before we hit the 3-hour mark here. So what else would be helpful to cover?
Well,
thank you for the lemons. Lemon fight.
I was, there's a lot about this that you can take and apply to something else, or you review in and of itself. So like it's kind of, there's already been, I wonder, is it past? No, it's 5 days away from a full year, right? Today, today's 360.
Yep, that sounds right.
So, it's going to be curious and interesting to see how people who are, committed to a long-term vision versus say what will happen, like, okay, so how long the bull market lasts in general, what that means for the hex community, hex price, hex stakers, and then how it exists during the bear market, which is not, it's designed to not really be too impacted up or down, but how, but that's
Good questions.
but that's a software, or that's a coding premise, right? But that doesn't touch upon how do people behave when, say,
Yeah.
all their other bags are going to shit in 2023, and they're like, fuck, well, I have a couple 100,000 or a couple 100 million hex that are sitting there. I don't know, should I maybe help myself through this bear market by early end staking? And so that's a social psychology that we haven't seen yet, because
Yes.
at this moment there's nothing but sort of positive hype everywhere, and most people, unless you're trading, are they're nothing but green. I mean, other than the last 24 hours, no matter what you're doing, it's green, green, green. But what happens if you're holding a bunch of bags and your hex is accumulating interest, and there's still got you're halfway past a 5-year stake. How many people are going to be forced? Maybe there's different circumstances in their lives, or they're just nervous or whatever. And that's why I'm saying it's interesting long-term case study. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, you'll be able to drill down into specific behaviors. I wanted to say thank you to Jimmy D. Hex for donating a diamond. Thank you. Cheers, mate. And Tobleruz, you're asking excellent questions, and this is a living experiment with a finished product. And are you still there? Okay, cool.
Yep,
and what we might find is that Hex is a decorrelated asset. When I was looking earlier today, Richard posted, oh, look, Hex is up 2% and everything else is down except for maybe there's a stable coin that was like stable. And
right.
But then right before we came on stream, Hex was up like 8%, not just 2%. And
yeah, that's the other.
So we know.
That's the other thing is maybe that means that in a bear market there's a huge flood into Hex, right? And then people don't panic. They actually see that their one bag is the one that needs to have everything in it.
Yeah, we're gonna find that Hex is gonna wash people out, and it's gonna be like sifting for gold, right? We're gonna be sifting out all those strong hands, right? And you dig into the dirt and you're sifting, and you get rid of all the other crap that you find, and you keep the strong hands, right? And one of the points that I want to make, guys, is that it's not just going to be strong hands who are attracted to Hex. Hex is going to make people into strong hands by raising their financial IQ, by teaching them the value of money, and by listening to the people in the community who are telling you to take your omega-3 if that's right for you, and when you get mad gains in your prefrontal cortex, then that's going to translate into more mad gains for the community and for Hex and for saving for the future. Thank you, Ballot Brand, for the diamond. Thank you. So I'm really excited to see what the behavior of the market is, but also what the behavior of the community is. And I think the more we can address this idea of let's do this together. We're all in a 15-year relationship with ourselves and with our money and with our community, and let's try to make that the healthiest relationship possible by creating a sense of community, by you know, I was eating my 2 small pieces of dark chocolate the other day, which is it's a brain food, a super brain food, and it said right there on the wrapper, it said, your vibe attracts your tribe.
Nice.
Thank you, chocolate wrapper. Like, that's an excellent point. So, the more we can make our vibes good, and you guys heard me talk before. I'll just plug it again because I'm a shameless omega-3 salesman, and I don't have a referral link, but I want people to do better. So we've got omega-369, right? This increases the prefrontal cortex. We've got the deep sleep stimulator thing that you put on your head while you sleep, and that stimulates your deep sleep. And I got a family member to start using this week, and that was exciting because they're getting better sleep and not going to have Alzheimer's necessarily the same way that they would if they were getting terrible sleep. And then I showed the other day 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C is good for your immune system and for your mental health. And then the 2 things that I was out of that I'm doing again for life extension and having stronger hands and programming my longevity so I can get get 3 or 4 15-year stakes out of you guys for myself. I've got the turmeric curcumin, which is one of those life extension things that has good research behind it that decreases inflammation. I think that's okay. I do that sometimes. The thing I'm really excited about is the resveratrol, and that's a life extension supplement that is basically, it's the equivalent. It says all the goodness from red wine without the hangover, right? This allows for cells to live longer and healthier. And so as a recurring theme, I will review what I've been doing to try to get mad gains in my health. And I hope that some of you will consider doing what's right for you and doing your own research.
Awesome.
Have you heard of resveratrol before?
No, that was first for me. It's got a funny name, actually.
It does. It does. Ballot Brand takes turmeric every day with his tea. You don't want to get that stuff on your clothes because the turmeric will stain them. Okay, I believe that. The pill form is highly concentrated. You can make tea out of it, and but I don't know everything there is to know about that as much as I do with the omega-3. But I'm glad. And you say you take a few thousand milligrams of vitamin C, and it's kept your immune system healthy. That's awesome. And it's my understanding that you don't want to get too many thousands of milligrams of vitamin C because then it might build up too much in your system. But everybody will do their own research and do what's right for their own course of health. I do know that with B vitamins, the higher you go up, so like B1, you can get like 10,000 times your daily dose, and it's water soluble, so it just flushes through your system. But when you get up to like B12 or higher, then it's like really you can't get more than 50 times your daily dose, otherwise it doesn't excrete all the way, even though it's still technically water soluble. So but by all of us doing our own research and sharing with others what works for us, that's the exciting part of being in a community that values health. And I know everybody else has been saying it, but I'm going to say it too. I can't wait to meet up with everybody at a conference and share kind of share our sense of community in person. That'll be cool.
Yeah, agreed.
Lazy for life. Thank you for the 100 lemons. I didn't see if it was a diamond or what, but you're on the leaderboard, so thank you. All the tips I will donate back to other channels and to pass it on. So, but it makes me feel good to see when you guys are pleased with what you're learning. So. Well, I'm really happy that we got this chance to talk for so long and to go through kind of some of the social psychology here and to talk about everything else that we're seeing as a possibility for Hex.
Yeah, me too. I've learned a lot, and thanks a lot for having me on, especially like you know, being so open and just brainstorming like whatever, that's fun.
Yeah.
No restrictions, just talk, right?
Well, it's been a pleasure. Yeah. So
Likewise.
I'll look forward to continuing our conversations in the future. And I want to thank everybody else for checking in with us on this Thanksgiving. So
yeah, happy
thanks
Thanksgiving
to everybody in the community.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Cheers.
Happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you guys next time here on Hex Therapy.
Thanks, Maddie. Thanks a lot.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.